No one makes magic in business like Disney. Join us as we hear from Disney cast members, influencers, and enthusiasts to uncover the secrets of what it takes behind the scenes to make Disney such a successful and well loved brand. We will hear their journeys, inspirations, and have some good old fashioned Disney fun along the way. So relax, pull up a chair, be our guest, and let's get down to Bippity Boppity business. Hello, my lovely listeners and followers. Happy Friday. What a fun fall season it's been for us here in my neck of the woods. This episode comes in such a timely manner because we are at a point in my production agency where I am learning how to be a better leader, how to be a better manager, how to take the business from, hey, you go do that, please help me, to how can I empower you as a team member to take what you have to do and feel excited to do it? This episode is so important because a lot of us in business, especially in B2B, who are growing remote and virtual teams, often struggle to find that connection and that level of leadership that goes beyond just the day-to-day tasks. And someone that I'm about to bring on, also known as Valerie Cockerell, just so happens to be quite the expert in just what I am talking about. So I'd love to tell you all just a little bit about Valerie. Valerie was born and raised in France. She graduated from Institut Petit Lyon. I did that. Sorry, Valerie, did my best with a degree in business hospitality. Long story short, she eventually joined Disneyland Paris in 1991. And over the course of her long tenure at Disney, she worked in various high performing roles, and including eventually moving to the Epcot Center. She moved to the merchandise brand management as well for both Epcot and Disney Cruise Line. But this show is called Bippity Boppity Business. It's not just about the Disney side of things. It's not just about, we gain inspiration from those things, but it's really about what happens after. What can we take from the lessons that we've learned in life and business and implement them to take our life to the next level? So Valerie did just that. She leveled up. She left the company and started consulting for outside organizations in the retail world. Eventually, she did so great, she returned to Disney to teach them how it's done. She was a contract facilitator for Disney Institute. She's facilitated so many wonderful professional development classes and custom programs in both French and English. And from her international management experience in both retail and operations, teaching Disney's approach to leadership, excellence, and customer service, she's taken all of that and now refreshed it in a way that I think is honestly very important. She has written a new book called Manage Like a Mother, where she brings simple to understand, easy to implement takes on leadership inspired by a mother's playbook. So, without further ado, welcome Miss Valerie. Woo!
Good morning, Rita, and thank you for having me. Thank you for this great introduction. Full disclosure here for French people, Bippity Boppity business podcast is a really hard thing to say. It's a mouthful.
I know.
So I had to practice this morning.
Well, thank you so much. My family, we're Lebanese and they also speak French too. And my dad always gives me quite a tease on the name of my show. He's like, you should have just named it Disney Business. And I was like, well, I'm pretty sure that's all taken, but we'll get there.
I'll tell you a fun anecdote real quick. When I worked for Disney Institute, in the script, in some of the programs that I facilitated,
yes,
we had to use the word operationalization.
Okay.
And for French people, this is a nightmare. And I used to live downtown Orlando and drive 15 miles to the offices or to Walt Disney World, wherever we were facilitating the program. Wow. And I would literally drive my car on I-4 and go, operationalization, operationalization, operationalize. 15 miles like this, so I could actually spit out
So
the
you
word.
the word. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm so happy that that you're here. Thank you for taking the time to do it. And I'm
You're
sure you had
welcome.
a little bit of a hoot when I tried to say that French school name. So we're
Yes,
okay.
you did perfect. You did well. You did really well.
Well, merci. So let's get a little bit into your story, Valerie. I read your book, and I it's so important right now. Some people can hear the title "Manage Like a Mother" and think, is this for me? Is this relevant to me? I would love for you to explain to our audience how you came up with the name of this concept and who it's truly for.
Well, the idea of the book came to me because I worked on and off for the Disney organization over the course of my career. So,
Mhm.
as you mentioned earlier, I was part of the opening team of Disney in Paris. And then this is where I met my Prince Charming, Dan.
Dan.
After 5 years, we got married in France, and after 5 years, we relocated to Walt Disney World. And when we did, I actually stopped working for a while so we could settle down. And we had a 1.5-year-old at the time, so getting our life reorganized in Florida. And then I
Mhm.
went back to Walt Disney World, started working in retail, as you mentioned, worked for Epcot, eventually also the Disney Cruise Line. And we had a second child, Margot. And then came a point where Dan was working in operation. I was supposed to travel quite a bit for retail, extensive travel, because having Epcot and the Disney Cruise Line, I had to go to all these destinations, which sounds like a lot of fun. But when you have two young kids at home, it's a whole different story. And it came to a point where between the grandparents and the babysitter and the nanny, we realized, other people are raising our kids. And we made the decision that I would stop working for a while.
Yes.
And so I stopped working for a while, but eventually went back to Disney Institute, as you mentioned. And every time I'd go back to work, I was kind of skeptical, or kind of underestimating my ability to come back and be an effective leader again, until one day. And this is not unusual. Most women tend to underestimate their own skills, their own
Right.
ability. And I think generally we suffer from a lack of self-confidence when we compare ourselves to men.
Yes.
So going through this process, one day I had this epiphany, and I realized, what it takes to be a great leader is really not that much different than what it takes to be a good parent and a good mother. And I could see the analogy here. And the more I started thinking about it, the more I dug into all the competencies that are required of a great leader. And I realized those are things that moms do day in, day out. They train, they develop, they give feedback, they recognize, they encourage, they empower, they delegate, they manage conflict when you have more than one kid. There's
Yes.
all kinds of nagging going on, and sometimes you have to be the referee. You learn to deal with crisis situation when one of your child gets hurt and needs to be rushed to the emergency room, and the whole family dynamic is shifting.
Yes.
So you have to react to that. Time management is another one. So the more I looked at all these competencies, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I could write a book, take every single one of these competencies, share a story of something I've experienced with my children when I've had to use that particular competency, and then extract the learnings and the insights and share that with others
Yes.
so that they can think about their leadership approach through the lens of what it takes to be a mom. And you,
Yes.
you don't have to be a mom to enjoy the book. You don't even have to be a mother, a woman, because if you're a man, think about your childhood. Think about what your mom or the motherly figure in your life did for you. When did it feel right, and when did it feel maybe unfair at times, because maybe your mom was holding you accountable to something that she was not being a role model about, or something she had not set the expectations for, and that felt unfair. So take all that learning and then apply it to your leadership approach, and that's what brought the book.
Yes. And, it's so important because I think about leaders that have inspired me in my life. And a word that often comes to me is nurturing. Nurturing and fostering connection, empowering rather than enabling. And I think about my lovely mother growing up, and she truly did just that. She never tried to do things for me. She'd always encourage me to take opportunities and to try new things. And I find that when we think about it from that lens of what you're discussing, is maybe you are not the quote unquote mother, but there hopefully was a female nurturing figure in your life
Hmm.
at some point. Um, that is so impactful. It does so much because it takes the business transactional side of what you're doing and shows you a perspective that we are truly working with humans. And in this day and age, when turnover in companies is so high, and whether it's the company or the team members themselves that are leaving, there is a need for calling back to understanding how do we encourage and empower our employees so that they feel that they can do their best job, right? So what are some high level concepts that from your research and from your time at Disney, that you would recommend for a leader who's trying to increase employee engagement in their company?
I think for me, one of the simple thing when I found myself when I signed the book just came out a couple of weeks ago. So I've been signing a
Congratulations.
lot
Yeah.
of books, and I always sign, the title on the front page is Manage Like a Mother, and I add three dots, and underneath I write and lead with your heart. And
Mm,
I think that's the principle, that's the base of the book.
mhm.
As a mom, when whatever you do for your kids, whether you do it well or not, well enough, there's a good intent, and that intent behind it is to make that this child that the best grown-up version of themselves, so they have the best life possible. And that's
Right.
what moms aspire to. You want just a couple of things for your kids. You want them to be safe, and then you want them to be happy and have a better life than you have yourself. That's what every single mother aspires to. So think about that. As a leader, that should be your approach. Your approach should be to really give that person the best opportunity to become the best performer they can be, so that one day they can replace you.
Right.
And the truth is, a lot of leaders are afraid of that. I don't want people to replace. What about if they take my job? You know what? There's no better compliment, I think, than having somebody on your team who one day does even better than you ever did, who goes, beyond where you've been able to go yourself. If you can do this, I mean, what an achievement. That means you've been able to raise them to a greater level that you've ever achieved yourself. So to me, that's the premises of that's what a mom does for a kid. This is what leaders should aspire to do.
Wow, that's so true that, that's a very good thing to call out. You want your employee to do so well that they hopefully surpass you. And that's not just leadership, that's legacy leadership. When you think about how Walt and Roy Disney built their company, I'm sure he wasn't sitting there thinking, "All right, nobody take my place." Like, you know what I mean, right? It's truly implementing concepts and theories that hopefully empower the team to grow and scale and create something bigger than yourself. And how beautiful is that you could have that positive impact on somebody's life to do that. I want to get a little tactical with this though, because I think a lot of people will hear this and say, well, that's nice, that feels good, but what are some consulting strategies that we can take this idea and try to start implementing it? For example, I think of systems and processes, right?
Hmm.
I think it's really nice to be, it's easy to tell somebody what to do, but explaining how to properly do it and
Hmm.
creating a system in place for that is very difficult, especially for, um, starting businesses starting out, for example. So,
Yeah.
with that in mind, let's say that that is an issue at a company and they're bringing you in. They're saying, we're telling people what to do, but they're not really doing it. What is the first step that you would take to assess and try to break that out of that cycle with them?
Well, I think the difficulty, whether when you set expectation for a group,
Mm.
is first understanding, have I set the expectations properly? Because what makes sense in your head
Yes.
may not make sense for somebody else, So first, going over that, and the only way you're going to find out whether your expectations are clear and well understood is if you go out there and engage with people who are on the receiving end of the instructions. And that may be your direct reports, or that may be 3 or 4 levels down. And this is one of the things we always advocate when you talk to an executive in a company. How often do you talk to your frontline? How often do you talk to your guests, to your customers? And what happens, unfortunately, in a lot of companies, as you move up the organization, you are distancing yourself from the actual, from the interaction between your company and the client and the customer, and you lose track of what's happening. I'll give you an example, and I'm not going to say which company it is, but about a year and a half, 2 years ago, Dan and I had a flight to Europe. 3 days before our flight was due, we got a call. We got an email that says, there's been some changes to your flight. Please reach us at this 1-800 number, which we called.
Mhm.
And the message was, thank you for calling this airline. Your call is really important to us. Your expected wait time is 6 hours and 23 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
And
No.
it went on like this for literally about 48 hours. And for 48 hours, we could not get hold of anybody at that airline, to the point that we got in the car and drove to the airport so we could actually find a person that we pinned down and said, we have a flight tomorrow. We've heard there's been some changes, but we have no details and we can't get anybody on the phone. Now, why am I sharing this story? Because I am pretty confident that the executive of this airline, of this company, had no idea that this automated message was going out there. If you can't handle the phone call volume, it happens. But then don't put a message out there saying your call is important to us, but you're going to have to wait 6 hours and 23 minutes.
Yeah.
What you do is you say, please leave your number and we'll call you, or get in some kind of, automated wait line.
Mhm.
So I think this is the danger, and this is often where leadership starts crumbling and falling apart, is the ability to communicate what you expect, communicate the big picture to everybody in the organization so they understand not only what they have to do and why they have to do it. I always say an organization is like a big puzzle. Everybody in the organization holds a piece of the puzzle. It doesn't matter if you're president, the vice president, the frontline person, the HR person, the finance guy, the IT person, or the person who empties the trash. Everybody has a piece of a puzzle, and every single piece is important. And if you're missing a piece of a puzzle, it's
Yes.
glaring,
It's
right?
obvious. It's
It
like there's a
ruins,
hole.
exactly, it ruins the whole picture. So what you want is to make sure that every single person in your organization delivers their piece of the puzzle, and they
Yes.
will do that only if they are so motivated to do so, and they aspire to do a good job. It's your role as a leader to create that environment where they are committed to this, to bringing this piece of the puzzle. And sometimes we always forget that people only, they don't only work for money. We all want to pay the bills, don't get me wrong, but we
Right.
also work because we want to be part of a team and we want to be relevant. And when you
Right.
make a difference, when you are relevant and you make a difference and you're important, it doesn't matter if you empty the trash or if you make the big strategy or you IT or HR, whatever it is you do. You may never even see a customer, yeah, at any point in time, because you work in a support department. It's all right. You still matter and you still contribute to the puzzle, and it's as important as anybody else. So the first role of a leader is to communicate that, and there should not be a shadow of a doubt in the organization that this everybody is important and relevant and moves the needle for the organization.
This is so important, and one of the reasons I brought you on, because in a previous call we talked about, in the customer experience in general, how artificial intelligence is becoming more prevalent in work and business and process. And while tools can be used to truly innovate the customer experience, just like how Walt Disney made Fantasia and the park to innovate the consumer side of what media could be, on the other end of it, technology can lead to miscommunication and can lead to that scenario where you just experienced, how that automation disconnected you from that company and unfortunately led to that negative experience. And like you said, if somebody had just sat down and thought, well, before we use this tool, what is the messaging of what we're trying to say? What is the why? What are we trying to make our customer feel? And how can we connect with them? It could have been resolved if if the executive had been there.
Mhm.
But it is truly difficult. It is difficult to find ways to, as you do grow as a leader, to take those moments to speak to the front line when you're so busy about your quotas, your end of days, and all of that. So, what are some small ways that leader, without taking too much time or lift, can find the ways to connect back to the front line? Do you have any ideas for that?
I think, first of all, experience the experience, see
Yes.
what it's like to be a customer of your own business. And either for you as a leader, walk your operation, and
Mhm.
not just walk your operation, but go and park where your customers park,
Mhm.
go and park where your employees park, enter through the same doors your customers enter or your employees enter. See what it's like. And if you can't do it yourself, because of course, you know, uh, if you're the vice president of the Magic Kingdom, you don't wait in line.
Yeah.
That's the reality. So I know my father-in-law, who I know you know very well. He would take our young child every Saturday in a stroller. He would put a pair of shorts and a hat and flip-flops and go experience one of the park. And I remember back then in the 90s, that's when Animal Kingdom had just opened.
Yes.
And I remember one day he brought Julian, our oldest son, who was, about 3 years old at the time. And he said, "Oh, this is so hard to be when you have to wait in line." And I remember a specific example. He went to the Kilimanjaro Safari in Animal Kingdom.
Yes.
And at the time, you had to surrender your stroller right away and then get in line. And being a brand new park and a brand new attraction, there was a long line. So when you're standing in line in an attraction like this, and if you've been to Animal Kingdom, I don't think it's changed recently, but there's no AC,
It's
right?
hot
It's
outside.
very hot. So within about 5 minutes of you waiting in line, your toddler, who's now standing because you had to park the stroller, sorry, what does the toddler do? He raises his arms to you and said, "Please pick me up."
Yes.
Which means that for you, for 45 minutes at the very least, you standing with a 3-year-old toddler on your hip, switching from one side to another. Old moms and old dads can probably relate to this.
Yes.
So, and when it's 95 degrees out there and 90% humidity, it's miserable experience.
Mhm.
Well, my father-in-law, who, was an executive at Disney, he would never have experienced that or known that if he had not spent the time in the park with his grandchild and go through the line just like any other guest. So shortly after that, he came back and they changed the configuration of the line. So now you get to keep your stroller within about 5 or 10 minutes of actually boarding the attraction, which makes it a lot more pleasant for families out there. But I think there's no other way. The way is
Okay.
to go out there and experience the experience and be there and put yourself in your shoes of your guest and put yourself in the shoes of your employees also.
Right, because this is a communication thing. Your employee could communicate something from their perception one way, but how do you know that they're thinking about the same things that you're thinking about when it comes to the full experience?
Mhm.
I really don't think there's any other way. You're right. You got to just take a day for yourself and go through the process and see what it's like. And then on the flip side of that, um, I'd love to talk about, let's say this leader has gone through this process and they've noticed that it's not necessarily the system, but there are some parts of the customer experience from certain team members that are not up to par. These are difficult conversations to have, delivering the feedback. You wrote about that in the book, and I thought it was so important. I think about how a mother would deliver feedback.
Mhm.
Hopefully, it's not, well, you stink, blah, 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 blah. You know what I mean? Right? So, this has been something personally I've been trying to develop as well, is properly delivering feedback. How do we do it? And how do we solve situations of this nature so that they don't happen again?
Well, the first question, there's different steps to it. The first step is
Okay.
before you deliver the feedback, think about, have I set the expectation clearly? Once again. And I
Mhm.
think a lot of discomfort about delivering feedback is because we're not sure we've actually set up the expectation properly. So review that and make sure that that's the case. And maybe that's all it will take. Maybe it's me saying, Rita, I've noticed this is what's happening. Are you aware that this is the process you're supposed to follow? And you may say, never heard that before. All right,
Mm.
well, let's correct that. And that's the easy one. So I think this is the starting point, is reviewing the expectation. uh, and then when you get into the feedback itself, number one, it has to be private. You say, praise in public and coach in private. So that's the major rule here. Find the right time to do it. And then keep in mind, much like mothers do with their kids, mothers do give feedback every day. They don't wait for Christmas to say, Rita, you misbehaved this year, and therefore there's not going to be any Christmas presents for you. Of course not.
Right.
They tell you every day what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong. And they do this and they still love you unconditionally. And because they understand, mothers understand, the rule of feedback is not to judge you as a person, but is to help you grow and change your behavior. So your approach needs to be, make sure you don't attack the person when you give feedback. It's not there's a big difference between saying to somebody, um, what you said was arrogant, or you very arrogant. Because when
Mm.
you say to somebody you're very arrogant, there's a idea of permanence. But when you say, Rita, you said something that was very arrogant, now it's a one-time event. I'm letting you know this happened, and we're going to discuss how this can change in the future. Did you notice that, Rita? Did you realize how people were reacting to your comment because you
Mhm.
said that thing that was arrogant? That's a very different conversation than saying, Rita, you're very arrogant. Like, well,
Yes.
what are we talking about? So, and obviously, you need to bring specifics to the behavior.
Mhm.
It always needs to be attached to a behavior. You can't go to somebody and say, you know, you're very arrogant. Well, when did this happen? Why do you think so? You need to be prepared for this. So that's the actual delivery of the feedback. And then the onus needs to be on you to come up with a solution. Let's say if I'm telling you, Rita, you're always late, and this is, I've noticed the past, that day you were late, and it is affecting the team for ABC reason, whatever. So making sure that the person understand how the behavior affects the organization, or affects the customers, or the peers or people you work with, and then said, okay, it looks like it's a problem for you to get to work on time. How do you think you can change that? And then it's up to you to come up with a solution and to make a commitment to change the behavior. And then the last step is, then you need to keep observing. And as soon as Rita, makes an improvement, letting her know, hey, you're doing a great job. I really appreciate you've been on time every day this past 2 or 3 weeks. And I knew you could turn this behavior around. Thank you very much. I'm so glad you're on my team. Done. Right. And
Yes.
if Rita doesn't show up to work on time, and the behavior continues, well, that's when you need to really, then you may have to document and start a disciplinary process. But
Mm.
I think if you do those 3 steps, before the feedback, during the feedback, and after the feedback, and practicing doing it, the more you do it, the easier it gets. But always thinking feedback is kind of a gift. I'm giving you an opportunity for you to be better. And that's what moms do for their kids. And that's what leaders should do for their team members.
That's beautiful, because there is a fear that, oh, what if I do something wrong and now I'm immediately going to get fired? Like that thinking of the team member, like, wow, I did something wrong, it's over for me. Like, I really don't think that that's sustainable for anyone want to be in an environment like that at all. They want to know that, they made a mistake, and depending on the severity of that mistake, this is something that can be rectified or not rectified. But in your book, you wrote something that I thought was really, this is a quote that I really liked: unacceptable behaviors quickly become
Yeah.
contagious, right? So if you do the thing where you wait until the end of year to tell some one person about one thing, others will notice and maybe start to mimic that same behavior. But it always starts from the top down too.
Yeah.
So if I am a leader, I'm always late and nobody calls me out or I don't do anything about it, then the team member might start being late. We're all going to start being late. And do I have the right to go yell to my team member, oh, that you're late? You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but tell me about this idea of conflict resolution as a whole, though. So let's say, there's there's teams that are now, they're doing great, they're doing a little bit better, but we're trying to take it to the next level and rectify some of the customer experiences. Let's say, for example, we'll do a real world example here. Something was supposed to be delivered to a customer one day, but it was delivered the next day, right? How do you then come back and say, what happened? How do we fix it?
I think what's important, first of all, well, when there's a conflict, let's say there's several people involved or several departments involved,
Okay.
the first reaction, emotions run high. So, you know how your mom sends you timeouts? She doesn't send you timeout so you would just, ignore the problem. She sends
Right.
you timeout so the emotions start, settling down, and
Mhm.
people can think rationally again.
Mhm.
So there needs to be a little bit of that, depending on the level of conflict that is going on. I think a leader needs to make sure that when they address the issue, the emotions have quieted down and people can think rationally. And then, there will be the finger pointing thing. This is not productive. So, yes, there may be one or two team members that want to vent, that want to say their piece, that want to complain. You know, you can hear it once, but you need to very, very quickly shift to, let's find a better way to do this so this doesn't happen again. And shift away from the finger pointing and discuss, okay, what are the common grounds here? What are we all trying to do? Let's not lose the perspective that we here to serve the guest or the client, or maybe it's the employees, because it could be a issue between support department or something like this. But I think rallying everybody around this common purpose, this idea that why are we here for? And the story I share with my book has to do with the jar with the coins.
Yes.
With my three children, they all 3 years apart. And there was a time where, there was a fair amount of nagging. And I found that hard to manage. So what I did, and I did not come up with this, I read about it somewhere, but it really worked uh, really well for us. I took their pocket change, their pocket money they had, their weekly allowance, which was just a couple of dollars. And I converted everything in quarters, and I put all those quarters in a jar, and I left that jar on the kitchen counter. And I said, every time you guys are fighting or nagging or, yelling at each other or something like this, I'm just going to tell you I'm removing a quarter from the jar. And then whatever's left at the end of the week will be split between the three of you, and that's going to be your weekly allowance. Well, the first week, needless to say, they came up to me to get their weekly allowance, and the allowance was gone. There wasn't any quarter left in the jar. And the three of them were shocked. And I said, I've been telling you every time that you started arguing, I did not go there. I did not interfere. I did not try to scold them or whatever. I just would remove a quarter. So after a week, they were, desperate for getting their pocket change. So the second week, slight improvement, and better the third week, and so on until, and it was really funny because I would hear them, they would start arguing over, the remote control or a toy or whatever. And I would hear one of them said, let's stop arguing because mom's going to take money out of the jar. And they learn in the process, they learn to remove themselves from heated conversation or what could have unraveled and become an argument. They learn to kind of discipline themselves. They develop more self-control themselves. And they would just remind, what was their common goal? Their common goal was to keep their allowance. So being reminded of the common goal kept the argument and the fight, it would just end up the fight. And it worked for us. And I wouldn't say it was 100% effective, but a lot of what could have potentially be big arguments between them, just they took care of it. I didn't even have to get involved. They would say, okay, let's not forget that we want our money at the end of the week.
Yes.
So, and I think those skills are really good skills to have, being able to have the self-control to say, you know what, I'm not going to let this get to me. I'm going to remove myself from this situation, and then we'll re-engage when we both a lot quieter and calmer. And then remind each other, we have one thing in common here. What pays our bill, what pays our paycheck at the end are the customers. Let's not lose track of that, and rallying around that idea.
I think it's a natural response. Like for me, naturally, I would want to intervene. I would want to be like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, what's going on over here?" Right? But what you're saying is impactful because that's not the best way to do it. Because what's going to happen is now, unless I intervene, no one will know what's going like if they're wrong. And then how tiresome is that as a leader to always be intervening, right? That's not sustainable.
As it is as a mom, it's like
Right.
if you have three kids that are nagging, and suddenly there's an argument and you haven't watched it start from the beginning, it's like peeling an onion. You never get to the truth, because one's going to say, well, it's his fault, no, it's her fault, no, he did that, well, she said this, and it never ends. So this is a waste of my time. It's really not effective as a parent, as a mother. And I thought, you know what, if they're going to argue, then let them learn about what it is to have, because conflict exists. It exists in the workplace, in any family, in any marriage. It's part of existence. We can't just love each other at every minute of the day. Maybe some people do, but good for them. you know. But the reality is, you need to learn how to compromise, how to manage those moments, how to remove yourself from a situation that could unravel, and sometimes bite your lips and said, I'm not going to say this, because if I say it, it's not productive and it's not going to help us in any way. So teaching those skills to your kids, hey, why not? And that's going to help them in the workplace later on.
Right.
um,
That's amazing. I also think it's something else that you pointed out is it is a waste of time, right? And in the book, you talk about the importance of time management and how but like honestly, for me, looking at all these amazing women who are mothers and have businesses, like superheroes. How do we manage the time? How do, there's not, I personally lately I've felt like I've been saying there's not enough time in the day. So, what are some advice for someone who's trying to rally everyone together, but really effectively do that so that hopefully, eventually, there's time?
I think, first of all, I always say, if time management was an Olympic discipline, I think mothers would be the dream team. They would have a gold medal every
Yeah.
time, right? Because and by nature, they never lose track of what matters most. And I think most mothers understand that sometimes leaving the kitchen a hot mess is okay if you take 20 minutes instead to go read a book with your child, because what matters is that you form that bond with your child, that you create a routine for them, you make them love storytelling and love books, and then they become avid readers. And when they're avid readers, they have an easier time at school. And when they have an easier time at school, they get a better education, which gives them a better chance to do a job of their choosing, and be happy in life. So mothers see this long term. They have this long term vision right off the bat, right? When the kids are 3 years old and start, they already know, we're going to set up this child on the right path for a great education and a great life. So I think leaders need to do this. One of the things we get caught up with is taking care of business, of the things that are, urgent right now. Sometimes we hold on to some of the things that we really should pass on to somebody else, but we just like doing them, or it makes us feel good about it. So we tend to stick with those things, when a leader's role is really to have this long-term vision and think, okay, this is the path, this is where we're going, these are the potential roadblocks, these are the potential opportunities, maybe our potential shortcuts that we should take. Those are the resources we're going to need. That's what a leader needs to do. Think about all this proactively, and make it remove those roadblocks and help the team do what they need to do to get to the destination. So I think mothers, they when they think about time management, they think about this: what matters most. And also, mothers are not beyond asking for help. When you're a mom and you have three kids who have guitar lesson, tennis lesson, soccer lesson, whatever, play dates, birthday parties, and so on, sometimes you can't be in two places at once. What do? You ask a friend, another mom, say, hey, can you drive? And there's this whole big carpool,
Yes.
do-si-do, you know, which is every mother knows that this is the way she survives. This is survival skills.
Mm.
So, but a mother doesn't have, there's no big ego here trying to do it all. They comfortable asking for help. Well, a leader, it's okay to be vulnerable also and say, you know what? No, here I'm tapped out, can't take on one more project here. Let's see if we can get some help from somebody else. And being very vocal about this. We hear, I was talking to somebody else yesterday about burnout. And I think some of the burnout, the reasons are people, they know it's coming, they sense it, they just don't want to admit that they can't do it all, and they can't say no. And sometimes saying no is a good thing. It's better to say no and find somebody else who can help support you, or maybe take something off your plate, then deliver something that's half baked, that's not done properly. And there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable and admitting that, you know what, I can't do it. Moms don't have a problem doing it. And I think that's another thing leaders should remember.
It's hard because sometimes it does feel like, um, it feels like if you're not experienced in asking for help, there's this mindset of, "Oh, well, if I don't do it, then they won't do it right," right? That's not a correct mindset, but that is a very predominant one, right? So, in this thinking, it's short-term thinking, but what you're saying is long-term. What if you did take somebody that wasn't 100% experienced, but then you nurtured them and you got them excited about the idea of what you're doing? Then all of a sudden there is that intrinsic motivation to do a better job
Yeah.
because it's not the thing that they do, it's the thing they love to do. And I think to bring it back to Disney just for a little bit, I do see that a little bit in the culture of cast members, especially in the era that the Cockerell era, if you will, of you guys did a great job at that. But no, I really do feel like that instilling of a strong why is very predominant. But
Mhm.
from your experience, how was that done? What did you do for your team at that time to have them feel like they were part of the bigger picture of the movie on stage? All of that long term vision.
I learned all of this over time. I'd be lying if I would tell you that I knew right off the bat how to be a great leader. In fact, I'm pretty confident that I was a really bad leader when I first got promoted
Okay.
I did it at Disneyland Paris in the early 90s, because at the time I thought being a leader meant being involved in everything, kind of controlling everything, knowing everything. And we had a 360 review in the mid to late 90s in France. And I remember when the review results came, I still remember this brown envelope came to my office. I was feeling like $1 million. I'm like, oh, this is going to be good. There's the feedback from my team and my peers. And my boss, and it's going to be terrific. And I remember reading the result and going, oh my gosh, clearly have not been a great leader. And there were a couple of things that now became also obvious to me, but um, I had too many ideas, so people were confused, did not understand the priorities. And some of the things I did, I would work like 14 hours a day. And I never expected that from the people who worked for me. But when your boss is here 14 hours a day, you get the message that if you want to one day become a boss, you have to work just as hard. And people were working too hard. And what came back in the feedback that I got, the 360 review, was that I did not respect balance. I wasn't promoting balance in my organization. And I was like, why? I don't have a problem if they leave at 6 o'clock, but I was there until 8 or 9 p.m. And a lot of people reporting to me felt, well, if I want to become Valerie one day, or take her over her job, I need to do. And they would stay there until 8 or 9. It never occurred to me to say, go home. What are you doing here? You have a family, you have kids.
Mm.
So I think, back to what you're asking is just having this self-awareness of what goes on in your organization, really understanding what the people who work for you, what they're going through, experiencing this, and engaging with them, getting that feedback. So over time, I learned that first of all, I didn't have to do everything, and I had to really articulate my expectation, have a standard operating procedure that was very clear, um, and being vocal. It's 5 o'clock, go home, you done for the day, and not giving people a choice, and really listening to them. I think the listening part as a leader is really important. We often get caught in the hamster wheel and don't always look up and assess how we're doing, how we're operating, how the people working for me getting what they need, are they trained the way they should be, all of that. So taking that bird eye view, this is the difficulty of leadership. Sometimes you have to be really close to the operation, and sometimes you have to rise way above it and take and assess what you're doing and how you're operating.
I feel that I will be transparent. I personally am in a season of working way too long, and for a long time prior to doing this research and this season of growth, I thought that that's what you were supposed to do. I thought you were supposed to work very hard, very long days, like show up, do your best, put your 110% in, but it's starting to manifest in that way where I don't want my team members to feel that way. But thank you for that perspective, because I never thought how I thought would, make that person feel that way. Because I'd be like, yeah, stop working, whatever, like, bye. No, but it's not. It's so important. I think more and more as well with virtual work too. This is a little hard because it is hard personally for me, and I'm sure other who are listening who work remotely, to be able to have that discipline to be like, okay, here we stop here. We stop at this time. We need to do this and cut it off, because it can kind of follow you everywhere. Um, Tell me about a one of a moment, a leadership moment for you. Don't name names, nothing. But what is a leadership moment for you personally that had a positive impact on your teachings and in your career? Is there someone that you feel like you helped, and what how did that affect you?
Well, let me share about a time when somebody helped me, and
Love
I
that.
think, being French and having worked at Disneyland Paris and then coming to Walt Disney World brings a whole other layer of, I wouldn't say challenges, but things you have to be mindful of, because culturally, you don't operate the same way in Europe as you operate in the US. And there was a lady who was vice president of merchandise when I worked in retail at the time, and I was the assortment manager for Epcot. So I was kind of the connection between the operation on one end and then the buying office on the other side. And my role really was to make sure that the operation was getting the merchandise they needed and making sure all the information was going back and forth between the two big organizations. And I remember one day we were having a meeting. It was a product presentation from one of the buyer who was buying for some of the pavilions at the back of World Showcase. And she did a great job. She presented this whole big initiative, which actually happened to be for the French pavilion. And at the end of the meeting, it was her moment, right? That was her shining moment. And I had a request for another pavilion that I'd been asking for this silly thing over and over again without any. And I was just frustrated with the fact that I wasn't getting that product I had been asking for. And at the end of this moment, which was her shining moment, I told her at the end of the meeting, literally as we were about to step away from the meeting table, and I said, hey, by the way, can you please take care of that for me? Because this is being nagging and is being a thorn in my thigh.
Mhm.
And the vice president of merchandise who was there, I did not realize at the time, but she saw the interaction. And then she said to me, Valerie, on your way out, can you stop by my office? So I went to see her and I said, hey, how are you doing? And she gave me the feedback. And she said, look, Valerie, this was her shining moment. And that was really not the right time to bring that up. And you delivered it in a way that was kind of harsh. And I know you're frustrated. I know this has been pending and you're not getting any traction here and you're not getting what you need. But this was just the wrong time. And I really appreciate, she was one of the few people that would give you feedback in such a great way that at the end you could only say, you know what, thank you so much. you know and
Yes.
and she was great. I love working for her. She was outstanding. And I think for me, I realized that the cultural difference, because in France, I remember presenting a big project to the VP of merchandise, and I remember at the end of my presentation, I went on for about 20, 25 minutes. And then he says, nope, that's not going to do. Got to start over. This is not going to work. And this is
Yeah,
why ABC, whatever, which was, quite brutal. But in Europe, that's how we would deliver feedback. And
right.
when I came to Walt Disney World, I came with the same approach. And I realized, that's not the way you operate in the US, and specifically at Walt Disney World, where
Yes.
people are all very nice and very diplomatic. And the same thing happened once. I was presenting the disruption project for Epcot for the Millennium presentation, which was a huge, huge project, even greater in some ways than opening Disneyland Paris. And I remember presenting the disruption plan, and the senior VP of merchandise said to me, Valerie, have you thought about this? And she asked a question, and I answered it, but I kind of dismissed it. And that very same person who had given me the feedback earlier said to me, Valerie, when the senior vice president tells you, have you thought about this? It's probably something you should really seriously look into doing. And I was just shocked. I'm like, why wouldn't she say so? But that's the way they operate in America
Yes.
at Walt Disney
Yes.
World, which was very
There's
different than France.
It's different in the sense of like there's an underlying tone or message, it's not direct, like do this, do that, whatever. It's so interesting, but I love that you said that it was impactful that you had a leader though that and or somebody who truly did just nipped it in the bud and truly coached you through and
Yeah.
explained to you to the point where you're like, thank you. Like, I hope to one day be that person. But for new leaders, Valerie, if you could go back to yourself however many years ago, you just graduated, you're fresh entering to the world of business, especially as a young woman in the world of business, what advice would you have for yourself or for that girl?
I think, well, I think, like I said earlier, is taking this bird's eye view of how you're functioning, because it is very easy to get buried under all the stuff that happens every day. And that's not the role of a leader. A leader needs to look down the road and anticipate. And what if this happens? Or what if this opportunity comes through? Are we trained? Do we have the right training, the right resources, the right people to do this? And also pacing yourself, because I'm a very impatient person. And when I was a leader, I always wanted things to happen fast, but there was very little thinking in, okay, here's the destination. How are we going to get there? And what do we need to get there? And how am I going to motivate everybody to get there by showing them the upside of doing this? And and I would often overlook this or dismiss it and not spend enough time in doing this, which would cause all kinds of issues down the line. So I think as a young leader, it's really taking the time to think things through before you bring it to your team, and make sure that it's well prepared so you can sell it effectively. I'm sure you heard the story of Walt Disney, how he sold the whole Snow White and
Yes.
the Seven Dwarf movie to his team, which was a crazy, crazy project. He did not just do that casually. He prepared. There was a whole setup on, he invited his team of animators to come to his studio late at night. He performed some of the roles, acted up some of the scenes, used some of the voices, acted like some of the characters. I mean, he clearly had thought through the whole process before he presented it. And I think that's a great thing to remember as a leader. You know this is the right thing to do, but now you have to be a salesman. You have to go and sell it to your team, and you have to do this well.
Well, I am so honored and pleased, Valerie, that you have taken the time to come on and share your expertise with us. But for everyone listening, there's so much more. This was just a teaser. Please go get Manage Like a Mother, Valerie's book. It is inspirational and easy to understand, taking very complex business practices, especially if you are a newer leader, and putting them in a way that you will enjoy and learn to love. So before I let you go, Valerie, I have just a fun question for you because
Mhm.
there's a little Disney side to this. Um, if you could visit any Disney universe, any Disney movie, and hang out with those characters for a day, just for fun, which characters in Disney World would you, if you could hang out with them for real, would you spend some time with?
It's funny. I was reminded recently, one of my favorite Disney characters, actually a Pixar character, and it's Edna Mode in The
Yes,
Incredibles. First of all, I love The Incredibles. I think it's a great. I love the humor. I love the scenes, everything. And Edna Mode is what, if not my favorite, one of my top three Disney character. She's funny. She's witty. I relate to her because she's impatient,
yes.
and and I can totally relate to that. And she's no nonsense, and more importantly, she can get you a super suit.
I love that. I feel
And
like you guys would really have a good time and vibe together. I could see her looking at you and be like, Valerie, pull yourself together. You can do it.
that's I just love her. I think I wish there was a standalone Edna Mode movie out there. I'll be the first one to buy that ticket. I tell you, she's
Listen,
awesome.
Disney, I don't think you're hearing this, but if you do, make the spinoff. This is the spinoff we
Yep,
want, okay? We want Edna's story. We want Edna's story.
exactly,
All
exactly.
right, Valerie. Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the
Thank
show. If
you.
anyone would like to connect with you and learn more, how can they do so?
Well, they can find me at Valerie at cockerellconsulting.com. And my book, Manage Like a Mother, is on every retailer: Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Apple Books, and Kindle. And I'm also on social media: TikTok, LinkedIn, of course, and Instagram. And I'm not a big social media person, so I have to say LinkedIn probably the safest way to get hold of me. I have a 25-year-old daughter who said, "Mom, your book is coming out. You have got to be on social media." And I'm trying my best,
Well, here
but
we are. We did
little.
it. We did that part. Here we are. We're on social for that. So
There we go.
that's
Thank you so
lovely.
much, Rita. Appreciate. I really
My
enjoyed our
pleasure.
conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.